A scream. That's what an eyewitness says they heard on the day Summer Wells vanished. A scream so sharp, so chilling, they believe it was the last sound she ever made. But here's the part that will haunt you. That scream was reported and then ignored. June 15th, 2021, 5-year-old Summer Wells disappeared from her Tennessee home in broad daylight. For 4 years, the case has gone nowhere. But this eyewitness account, overlooked, dismissed, and forgotten, could hold the answer everyone has been searching for. Today, we reopen this ignored testimony and expose what it really means. Because if the witness is right, then Summer Wells may have been dead from the very beginning. Before we begin, we want to thank you, our community, for helping us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support is what keeps this investigation alive. Let's keep pushing together from 2,000 to 3,000 and on to 5,000 as we uncover the truth piece by piece. Stay with us, because here we don't deal in rumors. We bring you evidence with truth. June 15th, 2021. Beech Creek, Tennessee, a small, quiet corner of Hawkins County. The kind of place where the mountains stand tall, the roads wind endlessly, and neighbors are spread miles apart. Life here is simple, tucked away from the noise of the outside world. But on that hot summer afternoon, silence gave way to confusion and panic. Inside her home on Ben Hill Road, 5-year-old Summer Wells spent the day with her mother and grandmother. Summer was a child full of life. Wild, blonde hair, tiny bare feet, and a smile that neighbors say could light up the darkest day. She was playful, energetic, and fearless, the kind of child who would run straight into the woods without hesitation. But in the space of just a few minutes, all of that innocence was ripped away. Summer vanished. Her family said she was last seen near the house. Within minutes of her disappearance, her mother made the call to 911. What followed was one of the largest searches in Tennessee history. Helicopters circled the mountains overhead. Law enforcement blocked off the narrow roads leading in and out of Beech Creek. Search dogs tracked through rugged terrain, steep slopes, dense woods, and dangerous hollows where a child could disappear in seconds. Hundreds of volunteers flooded the community, calling out her name, desperate for an answer. And yet nothing. No footprints, no clothing, no sign of a struggle. Summer had simply vanished into thin air. But even in those first critical hours, something important happened. Something that should have changed the direction of this investigation. An eyewitness reported hearing a scream sharp, sudden, and chilling. But instead of being treated as a key lead, it was brushed aside, ignored, and buried under the weight of rumors and speculation. And that silence, that failure to act on a possible cry for help, may be the reason Summer Wells has never been found. Today, we take you back to that day, back to that holler, and back to the one piece of testimony that could reveal what really happened to Summer Wells. In every missing child case, time is the most critical factor. The first few hours often determine whether a child is found safe or never seen again. That's why what we discovered in our investigation is so alarming. On the day Summer disappeared, an eyewitness came forward with a claim that could change everything. This individual, who lived near the Wells property, reported hearing a sound that froze them in place. A scream. Not just any scream, but the scream of a child. High-pitched, sharp, the kind of sound that cuts through the stillness of the mountains and makes your blood run cold. The witness told investigators what they heard. They described how it came suddenly, how it echoed, and how quickly it was followed by silence. No footsteps, no voices, no second cry, just silence. But here's where the story takes a disturbing turn. According to this witness, their report wasn't treated with urgency. It wasn't followed up, it wasn't fully investigated, and in the weeks and months that followed, it was left behind in a pile of overlooked details. Imagine that for a moment.
If a scream, possibly Summer's last cry for help, was heard that day, then it means one of two things. Either Summer was taken by force, or something happened to her right there in the holler. And yet that testimony was ignored. Why? Was it because investigators were overwhelmed by the size of the search? Was it because of conflicting statements from those closest to her? Or was it simply dismissed as unreliable? Whatever the reason, the consequence is chilling. A possible key to solving this case was left to gather dust. And the eyewitness themselves? They remain convinced of what they heard. They remain convinced that Summer Wells did not simply wander off. They believe she was silenced that day. Forever.
When you strip this case down to its rawest detail, that scream stands at the center. A sound, fleeting, terrifying, and ignored. But what does it mean? Let's break it down. Scenario 1. Abduction. If Summer was taken by a stranger or even someone she knew, the scream could have been her final resistance, a cry of fear as someone grabbed her, pulled her into a vehicle, or dragged her into the woods. The silence that followed would make sense. The abductor acted fast. Within seconds, she was gone. But here's the problem. There are no verified reports of strange vehicles in the area that day, and Beach Creek is so isolated, you don't simply stumble upon it by accident. Whoever came for Summer, if this was an abduction, likely knew exactly where she lived. Scenario 2. A tragic accident. What if the scream wasn't fear, but pain? An accident on the property, a fall, a sudden injury. If that's true, the silence afterward could mean something even darker. A cover-up. Someone close to Summer might have panicked, choosing to hide what happened instead of calling for help. This possibility raises uncomfortable questions about the people around her that day and why their stories don't always align. Scenario 3. Silenced. The most haunting theory that Summer's scream was her last. That whatever happened, accident, foul play, or abduction, ended her life immediately after. A single scream, then nothing. A child's voice erased in an instant. Each of these scenarios carries weight. Each one forces us to look deeper into the timeline, the people involved, and the choices investigators made. But one thing remains certain. A scream is never meaningless, especially not in a case where a 5-year-old girl vanished without a trace. And if that scream was Summer's, then it means someone out there knows exactly what happened to her. When a child goes missing, every second matters. Every sound, every footprint, every witness statement should be treated as gold. But in Summer Wells' case, something went very wrong. Law enforcement responded quickly that day. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, the Hawkins County Sheriff's Office, even federal agents joined in. They launched one of the largest search operations this state had ever seen. But despite the manpower, despite the technology, key details slipped through their fingers. That scream, reported by a nearby witness, should have been investigated as a top priority. It should have been followed up immediately. Instead, it was logged and left behind. No wide-scale canvassing, no urgent public appeal asking if others heard it, just silence. And that wasn't the only problem. Conflicting statements came from within the Wells family. The timeline of that afternoon was shaky, shifting between retellings. Who was where, when exactly Summer was last seen, even small details, they didn't add up. But instead of pressing harder, investigators allowed gaps to remain. Then came the rumors. Social media lit up with wild theories, endless speculation, and finger-pointing. Instead of controlling the narrative, officials stayed vague. They offered little transparency. And in that vacuum, truth and lies became impossible to separate. Even the searches themselves raised questions. Volunteers combed the woods for weeks, but reports suggest certain areas were searched over and over, while other crucial spots were overlooked. Was it poor planning?
or something more deliberate? And here's the most unsettling part. Nearly 4 years later, no one has been charged, no body has been found, no solid evidence has been revealed to the public. For all the manpower, for all the time and resources spent, the truth about what happened to Summer Wells remains hidden. And if that eyewitness was right, if a scream really did echo through those hills that day, then it means investigators had the key all along and let it slip away.
When evidence goes missing, when eyewitnesses are ignored, and when timelines don't match, one question always rises to the surface. Was it incompetence or was it intentional? Summer Wells's case is filled with shadows, details that don't add up, reports that fade away, a scream that should have been the loudest alarm of all, but instead was silenced in the paperwork. We have to ask, who benefits from this silence? If Summer's disappearance was the result of an abduction, then the failure to act means her abductor may still be free. If it was a tragic accident on the Wells property, then ignoring the scream shields those responsible from the truth being exposed. And if foul play happened inside that home, then every overlooked lead, every unanswered question may be protecting someone close. Cover-ups don't always look like Hollywood conspiracies. Sometimes they look like sloppy work, intentional delays, or a quiet decision not to push harder on uncomfortable truths. And here's where it gets haunting. Nearly 4 years later, the people who loved Summer, the people who search for her name online every day, still don't have answers. Yet we know there are people who do. Someone heard that scream. Someone saw what happened. Someone knows why this child never came home. But the deeper we look, the more it feels like the truth has been buried, under excuses, under red tape, under silence. And that begs the question, was the world simply too careless to save Summer Wells, or did someone make sure her story would never be told? Sometimes, in cases like this, people forget the heart of it all. They get lost in rumors, in theories, in pointing fingers. But at the core of this entire story is a 5-year-old child, Summer Wells. She wasn't just a headline or a name in a case file. She was a little girl who loved to play, who had her own laugh, her own smile, her own favorite toys. She should have been starting school. She should have been celebrating birthdays, making friends, living a life full of simple joys. Instead, her story was cut off before it even had the chance to begin. And that scream, the one that was ignored, if it truly was hers, then it wasn't just a sound. It was her final plea, a call for help that went unanswered. That thought alone should break every single one of us. The family is torn. The community still feels the wound. Strangers across the world who never met Summer still carry her name in their hearts. Because the truth is, every child deserves protection. Every child deserves justice. And when a child vanishes, it isn't just a family that suffers, it's all of us. But here's the hardest part. 4 years later, Summer has no voice, no justice, no closure. And that's why we're here. That's why we refuse to let this case fade away. Because Summer's scream may have been ignored once, but it will not be ignored forever. Now, I want to turn to you, the people watching this right now. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. Let us know. Because together, we're building a community that refuses to stay silent. Do you believe that scream was ignored on purpose? Or do you think investigators were simply careless? Tell us what you think. Your opinion matters because it adds another piece to this puzzle. And let me ask you this. If this was your child, your sister, your niece, would you accept silence? Would you stop searching? Or would you fight until the truth was uncovered? That's why we're here, because Summer doesn't have a voice anymore, but you do. And listen, family, we just passed 1,000 subscribers, and we can't thank you enough. That means thousands of people already standing together for truth. But we can't stop here. We need to push for 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, because the more of us there are, the harder it is for the truth to stay buried. Every share, every comment, every subscription makes this case louder. It makes Summer's name impossible to ignore. So stay with us. Don't just watch this video, be part of this movement, because Summer deserved a life. She deserved protection, and now she deserves justice. Her scream may have been ignored once, but with us, with you, it will echo across the world until justice is done.